Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast of probably approximately correct learners. Today, I'm joined by Hamsa Bastani, who is an associate professor of operations, information, and decisions and statistics and data science at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, where she co-directs the Wharton Healthcare Analytics Lab. Her research sits at the intersection of machine learning, operations research, and economics. She studies how to design, deploy, and evaluate systems, AI systems that empower human decision makers and improve societal outcomes. She aims to combine methodological depth with implementation in consequential environments. She has worked with national governments, including the Greek government, actually, to deploy algorithms at the country scale for targeted border COVID-19 screening and essential medicine access. And she co-led one of the very first large field studies of generative AI tutors in high school mathematics. She studies both the mathematical properties of algorithms and the way people respond to them. Her research has been published in leading outlets, including Nature, Management Science, Operations Research, and PNAS, and has garnered numerous recognitions, including the Wagner Prize for Excellence in Operations Research, the Informs Pierre Scala Award, I hope I didn't butcher that name, for Best Healthcare Paper, and the George Nicholson Prize. Previously, she graduated summa cum laude from Harvard in 2012 with an AM in physics and an AB in physics and mathematics, completed her PhD in Stanford's Electrical Engineering Department under the supervision of Mohsen Bayati, and spent a year as a Herman Goldstein postdoctoral fellow at IBM Research. And outside of academia, she serves on the Workday AI Advisory Board. Hamsa, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Sorry you had to read such a long bio. I didn't realize it was so
Oh, I
long.
mean, I love it. It's impressive. So the way
It's
that we
great to
go,
be here.
oh, we had a little bit of lag there.
Sorry.
So the way that we do this podcast normally is we start by research, and then we're going to switch over to topics beyond research. So first, let's start with research. So would you like to tell us a bit about the latest kind of like research idea or project or work? It doesn't have to be published, but just the latest thing that you've been excited about.
Yeah, I've actually been really excited about policy optimization recently, which is kind of an old school problem. One of the things that we've been thinking about, me and my co-authors, is the winner's curse, or also called the optimizer's curse or out of sample disappointment. That often when we've now moved to this world of data-driven decision making where we fit these quite complex predictive models to our data to try to understand what's going on, nonlinearities, heterogeneity, and so on. And then because we're in operations and our goal is to kind of, come up with decisions rather than just predict, we then end up optimizing against these predictive models to try to learn good decision making policies. And the problem when doing that, and this is kind of has been well known for many years, is something called the winner's curse, which is that when you optimize, you systematically exploit errors in your prediction model, and it also causes a distribution shift. And so, even though you might have a predictive model that might have really good, held out test set accuracy, might be really stable and calibrated, and so on, when you optimize against it, you end up getting these really weird solutions that actually don't hold water. And they actually perform much worse than you might expect if you're evaluating them based on the predictive model. And so we've been doing a bunch of work to understand what is the extent of this problem in our literature. It's actually quite large. Like a lot of papers report results that suffer from a lot of winner's curse. And so we've been turning more now towards solutions for solving this. And often one of the answers that, if you use unbiased policy evaluation methods, they come with very large kind of standard errors and people can't really say anything about them. And that's kind of why they haven't been widely used. So we've been thinking about whether fundamentally we can address different questions in policy optimization. So instead of just always asking for the best policy, maybe you might want to ask an easier question, which is, can I find a policy that is provably better than whatever is being done in practice right now? And it turns out that this has much nicer statistical complexity properties than asking to find the best policy. But turns out you can even go a step below that. If you have a small data set, you can even ask, does there exist a good policy at all? Like, is it worth it for me to go collect more data? Is there enough heterogeneity here to kind of motivate me actually fitting some complicated machine learning policy, trying to learn some heterogeneity and so on? Or should I just give everybody the same thing or do whatever simple thing we've been doing so far? And we can actually form this like kind of hierarchy of fundamental policy learning questions, which I've been really excited about because I think it really opens up kind of new doors.
That's really fascinating. So I want to like follow up a bit on some questions here. So, do you approach these problems kind of like you're trying to build the theory, the methodology for kind of like general application domains? Or are you also trying to find better policies that are better essentially only for specific application domains? And what are these application domains if you have them in mind?
Yeah, this is a great question. So generally, my way of doing research is a little random and kind of problem driven. So the reason we even got interested in this problem is because we saw that it was an issue in a lot of the literature that we were looking at. So, like, one example that we use in our paper is like this refugee placement optimization, which was like a huge paper that came out in Science from the Stanford Immigration Policy Lab and also in OR. And it suffers like a classical winner's curse problem. So the problem is that they're trying to predict, where refugees will thrive based on employment opportunities. So they fit a very complex predictive model to do that. And then they solve like a integer assignment problem to figure out who should get sent where. And the winner's curse shows up when so you fit this policy and then you evaluate your policy using the predictive model you originally fit. So it's almost tautological because your model thinks, Hara, you're going to do really well at MIT. Therefore, you go to MIT. And then I ask, how well does Hara do at MIT? And I'm using the model to tell me how well I'm doing, right? So you can only do better. There's actually no way that you can do worse. So people have shown that it's an upwards biased estimator. Um, and some of the results we show are kind of quantifying the extent of this bias, and it can be very large. Like, you can report results of the order like 60% better when the ground truth is actually null. But then we actually did a survey of like the management science literature. So we found 55 papers across domains that were doing kind of any kind of predict and optimize kind of pipeline. So this might be pricing, like promotion targeting and revenue management, or in healthcare, it's like targeting treatments to patients, it's a very general setting, right? Like data driven policies. It's basically anything where I fit some model and then I use that model to optimize some sort of targeting policy. And so as, kind of big data has exploded, we see this in service management, we see in revenue management, and we see in marketing and so on. And so in all of these papers, I think out of the 55 papers we identified in our sample recently in management science, 53 papers kind of suffered from winner's curse. Like only two of them kind of corrected for it. And so I think then we were kind of motivated to think about solutions to this problem because obviously it's like widespread. And so typically the solution is okay, you should just, go back to Rosenbaum and Rubin and, do inverse probability weighting or some sort of unbiased policy optimization, a policy evaluation method. And we tried to understand why people weren't doing that. And it's because those methods, they have very powerful guarantees, but the cost is that they have like crazy high variance. So if I fit a policy, it probably has very little overlap with the existing policy that whoever the decision maker was implementing, which means that it becomes very hard for me to evaluate that policy. So then we thought, well, then the question should be different. Like, why am I fitting the best point estimate policy? I should be trying to fit a policy that has high overlap with the existing policy so that I'm able to evaluate it without having too much variance. But at the same time, I can also take advantage of strong heterogeneities when I see them. And that's kind of like, that was kind of our first result that we were able to show that, like, you can get finding a policy that's provably better is actually much easier than trying to prove that the optimal policies is better. And then from there, we realized that, showing existence is actually also an easier question. So that shows up in like clinical trials, for example. Like you run these behavioral health interventions. I help with this through the Healthcare Analytics Lab. And maybe we have 200 patients. So we see some, glimmers of heterogeneity, and we might see like, oh, maybe targeting might help, but it's very easy to suffer winner's curse here. So coming up with a rigorous way of figuring out, is there actually with high probability some enough heterogeneity that there is a valid targeting policy out there that I should invest in to collect more data is like a useful question. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
That's super interesting. So you mentioned, just to follow up here. So you mentioned how you can have like an unbiased policy evaluation, but this can result in high variance. And correct me if I'm misconstruing anything from what you're saying. But I was just thinking, would it make sense to try to have a policy where you also quantify kind of like the uncertainty that it comes with? And if yes, to what extent are methods from uncertainty quantification useful in what you're doing?
Yeah, so I don't know too much about uncertainty quantification, but my co-author on a lot of this work is my husband Osbert, who actually his like primary one of his primary research areas is uncertainty quantification. I think the problem with okay, so there's many ways you can do uncertainty quantification. So one of the common ways that's being done in like CS and other areas is that you might when you're doing policy optimization, you also like you fit the noise, right? So you fit sigma, so you don't just fit the point estimate of your prediction mu, but you also fit the standard deviation sigma. And then maybe when you fit your policy, you're conservative by doing something like lower confidence bound or something like that. The problem with this is that when you're fitting these complex predictive models, they're often misspecified, and they suffer from, distribution covariate shift and various issues like that. And those issues don't just plague your predictive model, they also plague your uncertainty estimate, right? So what we've seen time and again is that, you might severely underestimate sigma in some part of your covariate space, and then your model thinks, oh, like we're very certain there, and then it kind of like just it like overfits the area, and then so you get another form of winner's curse kind of creeping back. Or a lot of what Osbert and others, like I think Michael Jordan's group and stuff, have worked on are these more like conformal prediction methods of uncertainty
Yep.
quantification. Those are very conservative. So often when we apply those methods, at least to kind of the data sets that we look at in operations, you don't end up finding strong policies. And so it's kind of like, I think there's probably room for different methods, but I think for the conformal methods, like at least that we've seen, it hasn't been very successful for us. I feel like IPW is kind of a more promising strategy. It's model agnostic if your action space is not enormous. And if you are careful to just make sure that you don't overfit your policy in places where you really have low signal to noise ratio, that gives kind of promising results. But my colleague Neha and I actually are doing some sort of LCB type method to address winner's curse for structural models where you actually can't do IPW. And they're like, that's the best that you can do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I also totally understand that someone that has started being more interested in, conformal prediction and whatnot, I was kind of saddened to see that sometimes it's not as interpretable as I would have liked it to be as a like an uncertainty, as an uncertainty method. Or it gives you like, it tells you that, something is a conformal prediction data set, but it's not very informative downstream. So I totally understand what you're talking about there.
Well, it's interesting. So I don't work on conformal, but I know a lot of friends that work on conformal, including husband. And I always go to their talks and they have like these really cute proofs, right? And I always ask them like, where is this being applied to? And they always say nowhere. So I think partly we're just waiting for successful applications of these methods. Um, but yeah, again, not an expert.
No, okay, but well, here I'm gonna. There has been some success of like applying these methods lately for in the forms
Mhm.
like of formal factuality when they're trying to essentially create a layer on top of LLMs in order to protect the factuality of what the LLM is saying, so that you have methods that can help you reduce hallucinations, kind of like in a post hoc manner. And this is kind of like
Oh,
a
very
wrapper.
cool. I gotta check that out.
Yeah, I can send you some papers. I
Oh, that's
actually
very interesting.
my student and I just wrote a paper on that as well. But yeah, there are other people that have done it.
Mhm. Very cool.
So I want you mentioned earlier that you have I think you used the word weird way of going about research. Why do you think that the approach that you would take here is considered weird?
Um, I don't know. I think like from early career on, I've always been told that the way I do research is not ideal for promotion or other things. So when I was a PhD student, I remember I went on the job market. I had one like more statsy, like a bandit paper, which was my job market paper. And I had one like very classic econometric empirical paper that was in management science. I think not published, but like, at the time. But it was like a straight up like what an empirical healthcare student would do. And then I had one like game theoretic modeling paper with Ramesh Johari. And like a very like applied micro kind of thing. And people were like, I'm looking at your like, and, like people be like, I'm looking at your CV and I have no idea who you are. It just doesn't like, I think people want to see someone invest in one bucket. But I find that very boring because like for me, like the draw of academia is that we can do whatever and we can explore whatever is interesting. And generally, when I work on a problem, I'm usually only interested in it for a short period of time. And then once we make progress in it, I'm ready to like move on to something else. I like the feeling of being stupid and learning new things, right? I don't want to be an expert in an area. So at least when I was in the market, I was told like this was an odd way to do your research, but hopefully you'll fix it when you're in tenure track. And then I didn't. So when I submitted for tenure, I got like the same comment where they were like, "Oh, like you have one pile that's like more machine learning algorithms-y, and then you have a pile that's like empirical, and then you have this random like behavioral research." Because I got really interested in human AI collaboration, which I really feel like you have to do lab experiments and apply behavioral M principles to understand. Um, but it was fine, and I have no plans of changing.
No, that's I mean, as someone that has like watched the trajectory of your papers, it has been fascinating to be like, oh my god, Hamsa is like reinventing herself again. Like it's just I have never like understood that. I mean, I could sense that it was something that it was a deep choice, but this is something that I could see from your papers. I was actually I'm actually quite curious, because you are advising students. Do you advise students to do that in their own like research trajectories, or do you try to take a more strategic?
No,
Uh,
I try not to advise anyone. Um, I I mean, I guess everyone's perspective is different. I guess I don't view, and this is partly what was behind my own choices, like even though people kept telling me this would be bad for my career, it's not like I did it because I knew I would still make tenure or something. I don't think that's the be all end all, right? Like, being successful in your career is like not the point of life, right? You should enjoy the journey and you should have fun with it. And, if for whatever things can always not work out, even if you do everything by the book, right? Um, and then you don't want to like look back and think, oh, like I didn't actually, I did everything the way people told me and I didn't get to enjoy my life. I'd rather like, you do the things that you enjoy and then, whatever happens, and things are constantly shifting, right? Like there was, all the federal funding cuts, which and no fault of our students, like people, there were just fewer jobs. COVID hit, there were fewer jobs. And, now there's Gen AI and everybody wants to hire in Gen AI and like, that affects things. So there's all these shock waves that you can't control. So I think what you can control is making sure that you're enjoying whatever it is that you're doing. So I never tell students to prepare a portfolio. I mean, I know a lot of people believe in that, but I really think, as long as they're having fun and they're enjoying whatever problems they're working on, sort of doesn't matter, if they get an academic job and things line up, then great. If they, end up deciding that industry is a better fit, then great. Like, these are all school students at top schools. They're gonna have great lives anyway. So the stakes are, in some sense not that high, right? Like they're smart kids and they're motivated and driven. They're gonna do well anyway. So I really think of myself as just being there to support them to achieve what it is that they want to achieve. But I don't really believe in being very strategic about it.
Yeah, it's such a lovely mindset, and thank you for like saying it out loud. And I'm hoping that the people who like listen to this podcast, I know that you and I interact a lot with junior students as well, and they are very stressed about. I mean, they were always stressed, but especially now with generative AI and what it's gonna be.
Hmm.
What does it mean to be a researcher in the day and age of generative AI? How they should like change the things that they like working on. I remember,
Hmm.
I have like junior PhD students that come in my office during visit days, and they are completely like they're so stressed, right? Because they've been going on visit days, and they are viscerally afraid that they're going to make the biggest mistakes of our lives. And I remember there was this one time that I told someone that, hey, like you made it, like your worst decision based on exterior standards, you're going to have a great life, like, right? And they almost like start crying sometimes. And you just, I don't know, like we tend to forget about how much stress they are carrying and how much we can help them by just like telling them that, you're going to have a great life. It's okay. Just try to enjoy yourself. And do the things that you love doing.
I think people are too stressed, and I think it's even worse for women. I think like when I was in grad school, I remember we used to get advice like don't wear your wedding ring on the market, don't tell people if you're in a relationship, and I kind of know where that's coming from because like people schools do worry about yield, and the last generation of women suffered a lot more than we have, and they faced a lot more sexism. And so people are stressed about everything, like on the market they're stressed about what clothes to wear and like what, and I'm like, just be yourself. Like I don't, like I wore jeans to some of my interviews. I don't like it should be about the work, and if people are judging you about things that are not about the work, then probably it's not the right place for you, right? Like maybe you wouldn't be happy there anyway. Like I don't, you know, like you like it's like you said, you've already made it. Like what's the worst thing that can happen, right? You got a cushy job at a nice tech company working on probably very similar problems that you enjoy working on. So I think people should just relax, enjoy life. This AI stuff is here to supposedly make our lives easier, not harder. So, you know, there's really no reason, I think, to, stress out. And you don't get those years back, right? Like, it's not like after tenure and like you're 40 or something, or you're a full professor, you look back and you can get those years back. So if you don't enjoy them now, then, you're just going to be stressed forever.
Yeah, for real. Shot it from the rooftops, honestly. So, how do you work with generative AI has been like mentioned in our discussion already a few times. So, let me
Mhm.
just ask explicitly, like, as someone who has a lot of theoretical and methodological work, how has your day to day changed, if at all? How do you incorporate generative AI in your research, if at all? Any like tidbits that have worked really well for you? Any things that you are avoiding? Just tell us how your life has changed as a result of generative AI in research.
So I know I said I try not to stress out about stuff, but when I was like when the stuff came out in 2023, I was pregnant with my first child, and I was really stressed out about it. Not about my career, but like what it would do for kids and for education. Cause like you remember, like kids were the first users of ChatGPT at like a massive scale, right? Like they were all using it to do their homework, college students, high school students, middle school students. It was crazy, and it was like a very worrisome time. So one of the first studies I ran actually, like while I was pregnant, so it was kind of an exhausting thing. My poor co-authors, Alp and Osborne, had a hard time dealing with me, but was we ran a randomized control trial to look at what happens when kids use ChatGPT or Gen AI tools to learn. And what we found was that, like they basically learn less, but they're overconfident. Like they perceive that they learn the same amount, but then they actually learn less. We've now run a bunch of, I mean, because I have kids and education is close to my heart. Um, we've now run a bunch more field experiments and randomized control trials to try to understand the effects of these tools on kids. But I think it applies to adults as well. And generally, we see, like, especially in longer term studies, this is a study that Stefanos Politis ran on chess students, right? So kids don't want to learn high school math, whatever, but these kids actually like playing chess. And if you give them like basically an AI answer button over the course of 3 months, initially they show restraint because they actually want to learn how to play better and they know that too much help is bad for learning. But it becomes a slippery slope, and so over time they end up asking for more and more help. They don't spend as much time thinking about why this was a move that was recommended or optimal, and they end up getting worse and they end up being less motivated. They learn less. And so I feel like I see this with myself or with other colleagues as well, that the more you use these tools, the less and less you're kind of motivated to like really engage and check the results. It's very easy to kind of just accept it. And so I just really believe it causes brain rot. So I very deliberately don't use it. So my colleague Aaron Roth at Penn CS is actually famous for using it quite a bit. And so he uses it, I think, in this very structured disciplined way, which I am not that structured and disciplined, so I struggle to do it. But he basically will like, sketch out the entire proof, I think, and then he has like specific lemmas or whatever where he knows the argument, but he doesn't want to like actually fill it out. And so he has the, GPT 5.4 Pro or whatever fill it out. And then he will also ask it if it can like tighten his bounds or find mistakes and things like that. So I I'm a kind of person where like I need to spend a lot of time struggling through a problem to build enough intuition for it to work on it. So if I go to any of these Gen AI tools, it will do something, but it's not what I wanted. And I'm not yet sure what I wanted because I haven't spent enough time struggling to figure out where I want to take this result. And so the only use case it's been useful for me for is for the last thing that Aaron does, which is, can you find a tighter bound? Like, here's my proof. Can you find a tighter bound? And are there any mistakes? And it has found like a couple algebraic mistakes that I've made, which has been great. But I feel like I can't. It's not the AI that's the problem. I think it's me that's the problem. Like I can't. If I outsource it, I don't build the intuition for it, and then it ends up producing results that I would say are kind of vanilla or like not that interesting. I used it a lot for a recent game theoretic paper I wrote with Gerard Cashone on like contracting. And I spent a lot of time brainstorming with it and I never got an interesting result. And then finally I was like, screw this is so frustrating. I'm not enjoying this. So I just spent a couple of days working it out on paper and then I, made way more progress. So I think if you're of the right kind of mentality that you can like really engage and be very disciplined and motivated and really work with it as a thought partner, then it might work well. But I think for the vast majority of us, if you are like, the kind of person that's likely to cheat on a diet, then maybe it's not for you.
I love the categorization of a person, the person that's likely to cheat on a diet. Um, it's very interesting because, I think I'm like leaning more toward like Aaron Roth's approach.
Hmm.
I'm also like struggling a lot with when it comes to, so what does that mean? What does the existence of these tools mean for our job? I know I have an answer for myself that I have like reached. I don't want to reveal it here because I'm interviewing you. But yeah, what like, do you to what extent do you think that our job is changing?
I mean, I think this is a tricky question because I don't know where these models will be at in a couple years. But like right now, it still can't come up with a good model. It can't come up with good insights. It can solve a model once you've decided what the model is. But I feel like that was never the hard part, right? Like I feel like you solve the model to understand the boundaries of like what assumptions you need to make and like what will lead to, this particular equilibrium behavior or something like that, right? And it's great that you can outsource that or at least outsource checking that. And actually I was talking to Aaron about this. Like he said, how did I get to the like he has a whole tweet exchange about it that I actually suggest people read. And he said, how did I get to this point? Like I spent many years struggling on, he was talking about multi-calibration bounds, I think. I spent many years struggling to like learn about this stuff, build the intuition for this stuff. And now I'm at a point where I can just do it, and so it actually is really helpful to outsource. So for me, I think partly because of my research style, that's just not possible because I jump around a lot. So I do need to take the like it's not like, yeah, maybe if it's a bandit proof I can just outsource it because I've written a lot of bandit papers. But in this case I was trying to solve some principal agent problem, and these are just a lot of these modeling papers, like, the model is very easy to solve, like, a 5th grader could probably do it. Like, that's not the hard part, right? The hard part is coming up with the insight, and I've talked to a lot of economists about this, and so far, I don't think there's a single example where it's, like, come up with a good insight. Um, Often when you give it incorrect proofs, it's not even good at finding the right part, like the really problematic error. Like it'll flag a bunch of stuff and then it'll say, I think these are all fixable because of this. But, like if you really wanted to like I feel like, to build intuition, you have to like really understand like why this is the thing that completely breaks the result, and what that helps you understand what is the assumption or what is the regime in which this thing works and doesn't work. And I don't see that yet. I mean, who knows what GPT, 7 or whatever will do. Um, but so far it feels to me like it's a really great hammer. So I think, back in the day when I was in college, I used to go to the library stacks and pull out books to do my research for like the essays I was writing in like my humanities class. And then I would copy those quotes over. And now you don't do that, right? Now you just Google it and it's become like much easier to retrieve that information. And I think like in grad school, I used to run around the stats department asking people, hey, do you know a tail inequality that would help me bound this thing, the scale divergence or whatever? And now I don't have to do that, right? Like now I ask ChatGPT. So I feel like the search part has become like so easy. If I need to find a particular bound or a tail inequality, like this thing is amazing. And often it'll even find like tighter, martingale inequalities in some random paper approved in a random appendix. And that's great. But for me, like that's not like the first order thing in research, at least for the kinds of papers that I work on.
Yeah, right. Like you're pointing out to something really true, which is that, if you're someone that does modeling for a living and you really need to understand the model behind, like a phenomenon that you're like working with or something else, then you really need a human heavy hand, at least for now. We don't know when that's going to stop being needed, but at least for now.
Right, right.
So I want to like slightly switch gears now. You've mentioned this
Mhm,
a couple of times already, so I feel that it's fair game to ask about it. I feel
mhm,
that you are kind of unique in the sense that you have a very active collaboration with your husband, Osbert.
mhm.
So is that how does that feel? Like, does it feel like every other collaboration? Do you feel that you can still maintain a good work-life balance, or do you feel that you're just constantly talking about, math and like research problems, basically?
Honestly, my husband and I have always talked about research. Like we met in college and I used to work in a physics lab and he was doing some like stuff on elliptical curves that I honestly didn't understand. That's been constant that he understands what I do, but I don't really understand what he does. But like we've always talked about research, but I think early on we tried not to collaborate because it was always viewed as like a weird thing to like And actually, this is one of the only pieces of advice that I got that I followed from about women specifically, that, like, if you work with your husband, like, people won't take you seriously. So I actually, I think I did, like, very conscientiously avoid working with him until, like, my tenure packet was ready or something. And then after that, I was like, no, it doesn't matter. So we started collaborating. He is my favorite co-author by, like, a huge margin. I respect, um, I mean, obviously, I'm biased, but I respect his intelligence the most of everyone in this world. But I think also one of the things that I haven't really heard people talk about is, like, then we had kids, and it is really hard to do research when you are having a child. Like, I feel sick at random times when I was pregnant. And then, when the baby was here, like, there's actually lots of chunks of time where you want to think about stuff, even for your own mental health. Like, it's nice to think about something that's not the baby and the diaper and the poop schedule or whatever. But, like, I want to think about research. I want to think about, it's almost like an escape to think about research, right? Because we come into this career because we love it. So, like, I really love thinking about these problems. And who is up with you at, 3 in the morning after you put the baby to sleep, like, for the fifth time, and, like, now you can't fall back asleep and you want to talk about, DPO or something. And it's probably your partner or ChatGPT, right?
We don't
So I
encourage
think
that interaction.
yeah. No, it happened to me a lot, actually. I spent, I think when like, a lot of my friends who have multiple kids, right? So, like, one partner takes one kid, the other one takes the other kid. And then, they're up at, like, weird hours. Like, parenting is hard. And who can you talk to when you're up at 3 in the morning? Nobody, right? So you talk to Gemini, which I'm not saying that's, like, a healthy thing. It's just, just the practical reality of it. I remember one night my baby was crying and we couldn't figure out what was going on with her. And I gave up and I asked Gemini, and it actually walked me through a checklist. It was like, she eat, like, you chuck the diapers, you do this. And it was right. It said she probably has a rash, and she did have a rash. And I didn't even know to look for that because I'm a first time parent at the time. So, it has its uses.
Oh, wow.
But I think I love it. I think most couples that, are nerds and kind of enjoy each other's company, like, it's actually nice. We get to spend time together and it's still working. So we actually get to spend more time together than we normally would.
Okay, here's a tricky question though. Are you both at the same level of what a write-up should look like? Do you have the same I don't know, the same like obsession with like write-up and like I don't know, like defining macros and everything and anything in between over there?
No, we don't agree on anything.
There you go.
So I think we each we each have our own hill, and we, like, respect the hill that the other person's on. So, like, I'm really anal about the writing. And my husband's in computer science, and the quality of writing in computer science, I don't think I'm offending anyone by saying it's far lower than the quality of writing for our journal papers in social science, right? Just because of the volume of papers. Like, he publishes, like, 10 machine learning papers a year easily at top ML conferences. I published 10 papers probably in my entire tenure period and my PhD combined, right? So it's like the scale is obviously super different. And so we do spend a lot of time polishing. I'm very proud of most of the papers I write. And I OCD a lot over the writing. So he's sort of given up and lets me do that, even though it delays everything a lot and we waste a lot of time arguing about it. He's very anal about notation and macros and, the way things are spaced in LaTeX. And I just, let him do his thing. So, you know, I mean, as with any collaboration, there's compromise. It's actually much easier to compromise with your partner than it is with a co-author that you, like, don't know that well, right? Like, usually your co-author will not tell you, like, "Oh, you're driving me insane by using this, like, slash comma in your equation, like your equation or your formula punctuation. I remember one day during my PhD, Mosen, my advisor, just snapped and told me that I was driving him insane by not punctuating the equations. And if it were him, he would just reject the paper because of the lack of punctuation on
Mhm.
formulas. And I was like, oh, like, why didn't you tell me? And, you don't wanna tell your co-author that because 'cause you're not that comfortable with them yet, right? Like, you don't wanna, like, because it doesn't actually matter. But with, a longtime friend or a partner, you can like, you can share your randomness more easily, right?
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel that being part of an academic couple has like been more stressful or less stressful, or do you think that like stress wasn't ever a part of the equation for the two of you?
I mean, I think yeah, that's like I mean, the two body problem is incredibly stressful and very hard. It's very hard for two people in different fields to find positions in the same school that they both like, right? And it's also a compromise, right? Like his first choice and my first choice have never been the same. So we've always tried to optimize for each other or the minimum of our utilities. Um, which is also a choice that, like most people don't support because you know, when you're on the market, people are very strategic, right? So they're like, you should take, what is that thing they say like these days, career maxing or something? Um, I
Mm,
guess the nice thing from what?
I don't know. I didn't know about the word career maxing, but
Yeah, I've heard
so
this a lot
says.
recently where people are like, "Oh yeah, like when you're young, you should just career max, and then after you are like established, you can like find a position." And I don't, yeah, so I guess this goes back to the whole, like, not being too ambitious or strategic thing. Like, my husband and I, we've always, put our relationship first, which is a very old school thing to say, but it's not like, there's no gendering there. Like, he puts me first and I put him first. It's equal in that way. And so we both decided up front that, like we weren't gonna do long distance. Like we loved academia, but it wasn't like worth it. Like wasn't worth it to compromise on our relationship. I'm very happy with that choice. I actually think, we both had multiple offers and I think we both could have been successful at a lot of places. But like I'm really glad that, I got to spend my time, my 20s with the person I love because when I came to my 30s, we have kids. And so, it's a very different life. It's not, we don't get to spend, I mean, we're together all the time, but, it's always about the kids, right? Which is a joy of its own, but it's a different life. And so it's really nice that we kind of had, you know, all these years together, as a couple, and then now we have all these years together as a family, and I'm really looking forward to, like, when the kids move out, and we'll have all these years together as a couple again, right? Um, I think people undervalue, like, how much, like, just being happy in your day-to-day life matters, because academia has its ups and downs for sure, right? There were many times when I thought, "I'm not gonna make it in this job, my papers are all getting rejected, think people hate my work." And it sort of never mattered that much because I got to come home to the person I love. But I think if I had like compromised that and, did long distance or added all these extra stressors in my life, I think that would have made me sadder and probably less productive and probably less successful overall. So like I think, I think it's really important to like, have and it's not like easy to career max and then solve your two body problem. It's not like I mean, you can be a tenured professor at MIT. It's not like every school wants to hire you and your partner, right? So if you can find a solution, I think finding it like it has to be a priority, right? So you have to be willing to give something to get something, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the thing that I love most about your response, by the way, is that like outside of the final downstream choice that you made for yourselves, which is, that we put our relationship first and that's the guiding thing about all the choices that follow. I think the thing that I love most about your response is that you seem to be very intentional about this and you seem to be very intentional about, happiness maxing, and so you've thought about the different options and then you're like, you know what? The thing that matters to me the most is, happiness, and how do I achieve this happiness. So I think this is something that people very often kind of like forget. They think about the external measures of quote unquote happiness or success or whatever, but they just don't like, stop and think about themselves. What will make me happy here? And I love that your response was very intentional about this.
Well, one of the really interesting things is that recently I came across one of Michelle Obama's interviews, who I love her. And she was actually saying her kids are like always trying to be happy, happy, happy. She was saying that's also not great because, like, like it's very hard to be happy all the time. You can be content, and you can do service, right? I think of even having kids as a service, right? Like basically we're agreeing to be servants to these little things. We give them all our time, all our effort, all our, money, any space that you have in your life, you give it to them, you give them your sleep, right? And that, yeah, I think I think one of the things in life is like, it's not just like instant joy and instant pleasure. Like right now with a baby, of course, you have that because they laugh at you and it's like the best feeling in the world. But like often it's just, there's like a contentment of like, of just like, of the choices that you've made, that you should be satisfied and you should be, you know, you should look back and like, feel that it was. And so I think being intentional really matters. But I mean, I think we were also lucky. You can't really say anything off of one sample. Like, I mean, the reason that a lot of these female faculty give opposite advice is because they have seen horrific things happen, right? Like people have given up, some really high tier like Stanford job or something, and then, the husband cheated on them or something like that, right? So things can always go wrong. I think in our case, we were very lucky. I married someone who's incredible. But I think, at every point you can only make the best choice that you can see at that time.
Exactly. You make the best choice given the information that you have. And it's good, again, like back to
Mhm.
intentionality. It's good to, tell yourself that I I did the best given the information that I had, and then just like be kind to yourself about it. So
Right, exactly.
given you mentioned also kids, you mentioned we talked about Osbert quite a bit. Tell us about a typical day in your life, and how does that differ? I guess it differs easily from a version of you that didn't have kids. But if you also want to
Mhm.
talk to us a bit about how your typical day differs from your day, maybe when you didn't have kids or even when you were a PhD student.
Yeah, I think it's like wildly different. And I know everybody says that and it's so cliche, but when it happens to you, it still punches you in the face. Like, for me, the biggest thing was the sleep deprivation. Like, it's just, I've always, like I said, I really love research. And so, like, since I was in college, like, I wasn't thinking about operations, I was thinking about physics, but, whatever. I've always, like, had a problem in the back of my head that I like to think about. So, like, if I go for walks and we're going on a date, like, we'll talk about, like, I'd like to talk about this problem in the back of my head. When I'm taking a shower, I'm thinking about it. When I'm sleeping, when I'm trying to sleep, I'm thinking about the problem. And I don't know. I've always I've always really enjoyed that. But when you have kids, you don't get to sleep as much, which means that it actually becomes really hard to think about anything. Like often now I'm just staring at the wall and there's like nothing going on in my head. And when there is stuff going on in my head, I'm like, also there's all this extra mental load of like, oh, I gotta like make sure she has enough diapers and I have to like make sure I, stocked up on formula and I have to like, did I, wash this thing? When is the last time I changed her diaper? Like there's always all this chatter in your head and it's kind of hard to distinguish. So when they start daycare, it's a lot easier. Because now out of sight, out of mind to some extent, right? Um, but that's like, 8 hours a day, like, maybe less depending on your commute. And that's only weekdays, right? So it's not I feel like I had so much time to think when like before kids, and I really enjoyed that. And now I don't have that much time to think. It's very much like, oh, if I like don't think about this now, like I'm not gonna be able to think about it later. And if I don't get enough sleep one night because, she woke up in the middle of the night, then like the whole day is like ruined. Like I'm in meetings, but my brain is really not producing anything of value. So I think, like the amount of time for just intellectual activity goes down a lot. And, it's replaced by so many joys as a parent. Like, I have never been as happy as I have when my daughter's like laughing and my husband's laughing with her and they're playing together and watching that. It's just like, such a privilege to see, your partner become a father, your child, like this person that you created, blossom into a person and have personality and like, there's nothing I would do differently, but I do think it's very difficult to balance, yeah, like, especially our kind of work, which is very intellectually demanding. Like, I can do reimbursements, and I can like prepare, like I can prep teaching slides that I've already prepped, right? Like a lecture that I've already given before, and like all of these things that are more like routine rote work, like I can do with the kid easy. But if I just want to sit there and think about a new problem or like really marinate, like that's really hard now. And I think I've been told it gets easier as they get older because they like sleep longer and stuff. But I do think it's just a slower season, and it's hard to accept that, especially if you are used to doing a lot of research. But you just have to, I guess.
Yeah. How long does she sleep for now?
She's not too bad now. But she does wake up like in the middle of the night, like she'll wake up looking for her bunny or like wanting to cuddle with us, right? And I think it's tricky because like she'll sleep 6 hours, wake up, cuddle, and then go back to sleep for another 4 to 5 hours. So she will like sleep, 11 hours or so. But if I get woken up at the 6 hour mark, I'm not going to be able to fall back asleep. So, I used to always get 8.5 hours of sleep before having a kid. And now that's like a rarity because you almost always get disturbed midway. And then, if you've only slept 2 hours, you can fall back asleep. But once you've slept, I think usually for me, it's like 5 hours or so. I just can't fall back asleep again.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so we have discussed a lot. We've like talked about a lot of different topics. We're coming up to the end of our podcast. Before we conclude,
Hmm.
I would like to ask you if you have any specific parting thoughts. So they can be about anything you want, about, life in the generative AI research world that we live in. Any parting wisdom that you have about people that are thinking about their family in research or starting a family while they're doing research or they're academic. So anything you want to talk about, any like other initiatives that you wanted to highlight, really anything, the floor is yours.
I think it's kind of a cool time. I think it's kind of a cool time to think about a lot of important questions. Like one of the things that's really been bugging me is like how quickly these generative AI tools have proliferated for very important decisions, especially in the global south. Like it's not so much in the US, but I think in the US it's also just less documented or reported. But in the global south, like, there's like billions of people, I think is not an exaggeration, using this stuff for, important healthcare decisions and livelihood decisions. Like, if you're a farmer, like how do you actually decide your agricultural outputs? And like, I mean, I know these tools are powerful, but they haven't really been vetted in these contexts, right? I mean, it's as good as the input. And if you're trying to decide what to do with your small business or if you're trying to decide what to do with your health, it's not clear that people know that they should put all of their information in. And so there might be all these unobserved constraints or costs or whatever that like aren't fully represented. So even assuming these tools are amazing and they don't hallucinate and things like that, and they produce culturally appropriate answers, you have this missing information problem, and then we've seen it like create harm. Like, there's papers showing that like some small business owners, like, use ChatGPT and then they actually end up losing money, which is terrible. Uh, and so I just worry about the speed at which these things are being deployed in education, like affecting our youth, like, the most important parts of our society, the most important, the most vulnerable populations and so on. And I think it's a good time for academics to be thinking about how we can mitigate the harm that comes with these kind of tools, how we can, like, how do we even measure these things? How do we mitigate them? What are the tools that we can provide as sort of, a more unbiased source compared to the tech companies that obviously have, various financial obligations to their stakeholders. Um, so I don't know. I think it's a good time to be doing research. It's a good time to be in academia. For those people who are worried about what it means to be a researcher, I think I've never felt better about being a researcher.
Well, on that wonderful note, I couldn't have said it better myself. There couldn't be a better ending for this podcast. Hamza, thank you so much for joining me today. It was really a delight chatting with you. And for everyone who's listening, don't forget to subscribe for more podcasts in the future. Hamza, thank you so much.
It was great chatting with you, Hara. Thanks. Bye.